individuals oh, that's new. I don't remember it telling you it was recorded. I think that's maybe some lawyers got to talking with Zoom and they had made sure everybody knew that. But so anyway, so I think that it's definitely something that and then when you have the complexity of a criminal record, and then also people receiving services through Medicaid or the other support systems, I think it's a very interesting and complex topic. Can people see the screen? Because I'm seeing people's faces. Okay, none of my windows are blocking it. It's not saying anything like that. Okay, cool. All right, so I think that's the just conversation topic, and I'd love for people to jump in, or you can use the chat box. But Kendra, are you okay if we ask you to speak and share? So
yeah.
Okay, awesome.
So I work with Southeastern, so I work with a lot of mental health clients. I have clients from drug court, mental health court, and CTP. So I'm getting a lot of referrals that, they have 20, 25 page background checks when we do their background checks. And so it gets to be challenging sometimes with those, especially with the sex offenders, because if we do find a place that that'll hire them, we then have to make sure it's okay with like the probation officer and stuff like that. Have somebody who just started in fast food who is a sex offender, and he has to clear it with like the PO and his therapist and the group and all that. So it's not only just finding an employer who will hire them, but then also making sure that all their other team members are okay with where they've been placed.
Right. And that one of the topics on the next slide is just that coordination with other criminal justice systems that you said the parole officer, and what was the court? The court has?
So I work with drug court and mental health court. And
so
the judge has to be okay with it and all that stuff too.
Yeah. Okay. And I apologize, Kendra, and I'm sorry to ask this. You work for, who do you work for again? Sorry.
I am with Southeastern Behavioral Health Care.
Okay, cool. Okay. So about 90%. And then, so then to kind of, as we go down those, and again, I wasn't exactly sure how we talk about this topic, but could you walk through just how you would meet like one person, like how that would go, and then what information you would get? Does a referral come from VR? Or does it
so my referrals generally come from the case managers here at Southeastern.
Okay.
So I work with our clients across the street, and then we also have a population that is has developmental disabilities. So I get referrals from both parts of the agency, and then I get outside referrals from the VR counselors, maybe like 10% of the time. Okay. But I'm actually doing the intake paperwork and then sending it to VR. So I do it kind of the opposite way.
Yeah. And you guys are a unique situation, right, Jordan?
Yeah.
That not everybody. Okay. Okay. So then how are people in your situation? How do they know that they're eligible for your services? Like how do they find you?
They're if they get services from Southeastern, they're pretty much eligible.
Yeah. How do they, to take a step back, how do they get services from Southeastern? Like how do they find Southeastern?
So there's a lot of different ways. And, if somebody has gone to Avera Behavioral Health, they'll usually get a referral to Southeastern. Okay. I'm not really involved in that process of how somebody becomes a client here, so I'm not 100% sure and don't want to say the wrong thing, but I know that it's usually referrals from outside, resources that we work with that we get the referral from, and that's how they become a client of Southeastern.
Okay. And then how does that funding work? Is that Medicaid?
Yeah.
Okay. So typically people are relatively, I hope this isn't too much of an assumption, but Medicaid, there are asset and income tests to receive Medicaid's funding. So the assumption is that people are impoverished. Is that I don't want to be, okay. So people are struggling economically and socially, which, it's kind of, I read there was something called the Half in 10 report a while back that was about poverty and disability. And so it's kind of like the cause and consequence, function of what's cause and what's a consequence. It's so hard to pull that apart, right? Because it's all intertwined a lot. And like the assumption is if people had a job that was stable and a routine, of course you're with people after maybe they've So
Yeah, I actually work with like a lot of folks that are staying in the shelter who don't even have homes.
yeah,
So we've got that, and then they've got a record, and then, so
yeah.
there's just a lot working against them at
Sure,
times.
sure. I mean, and typically probably isolated from relationships or people support
Or they're in
networks.
really toxic relationships. It's
Or in
either
toxic.
one, it's
Oh
like
yeah. Okay.
one extreme or the other.
Right, right. Sometimes it'd be better to be isolated maybe in some of the
Yeah.
relationships. And are these individuals typically in communities that they or have spent some time in, or sometimes are they in different, you know what I mean? Like, are they known? Are they, does that make like, not, do they grow up, not that this is their hometown, but I know it's like sometimes to go to a shelter, like you have to leave where you typically live to go there,
Mhm.
or like when people, like halfway houses, when people come out of the criminal justice system, they're typically not in the neighborhood they grew up in, they're somewhere else, and then they have to get a job. Does that make sense? Like they have to get a job in a new community.
E-
Um,
um,
just,
it's kind of hard to answer that one. I don't know,
okay.
because like in Sioux Falls is so big, and
Yeah. So most people are from around there, you think?
I would say most of them, yeah.
Okay, cool. Cool. And then, so how do you, so then you would do a background check? That's part of your intake?
So I do the intake paperwork, and then when they meet with the voc rehab counselor, he authorizes for a background check. And so
Okay.
then I get a copy of that so that we have dates and accurate
Yeah.
charges and stuff.
Okay.
And one of the big things that we've run into is charges that have been dismissed or are supposed to be sealed because they're working with mental health court or the drug courts
Uh-huh.
are showing up, and they're not supposed to. And so employers aren't supposed to be able to make their decision based on those, but
Right.
they are.
Mm.
And so that's a really big issue that we've been running into lately.
Okay.
I actually just had a gal who she was arrested because she was in a car where marijuana was found, and all four of them were charged with possession because nobody would confess to it being theirs. She applied for a job, and the pending charge for possession showed up on her record, and she wasn't hired because of that. And then later the charge was dropped because somebody finally admitted to it being their pot. And so she was not hired for something that wasn't even something she was guilty of.
Huh. And are there, I'm sorry, I'm just going to write this down. I'm going to make a note. Are there, so what's the resolution for that? If, so just to recap, you're saying that sometimes when they're getting background checks, it's that charges or charges or
I was always under the impression that those pending charges wouldn't show up, but they are.
Okay.
Because they haven't actually been found guilty yet.
Right. And then are there other charges that that you said, or I think you're going through like drug rehabilitation that should be hidden though too?
So if they're working with mental health court and drug court, as long as they're like complying with everything, the charges that got them there are supposed to kind of be erased basically. But we have found in a couple incidents where that wasn't the case, which that we were able to kind of resolve by going to the courts and being like, hey.
Okay.
So.
But that's just good. It's important to know, right? Thanks, Jordan. Because if that's not supposed to be there and it shows up, so if people are going through treatment, if they're going through active treatment and that kind of stuff, it's supposed to be hidden.
Yeah, they have to go to court once a week, and they have to do like MRT and DBT and all these groups and stuff, and then.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay, that's important to know. And then, so most times people will let you know themselves that, hey, I have this history, or I have this, or what percentage of the time is it like, oh, you didn't tell me that, and then VR finds it, or.
I mean, they're mostly pretty upfront about it. I mean, a lot of times I get I have lots of charges. I don't know from when or what they all are, but I have a lot. It's usually what I.
And they give you permission to.
Yep.
They have to. And Jordan, is that for everybody that comes in with VR, or if they select affirmative, like if they self disclose?
Generally how VR handles it, and just so that everybody knows, we're getting things ready so that one of the district supervisors is going to kind of present on how VR handles our background checks and what we do with that information. So that information is going to be presented at the training, but kind of how we do it is during our intake processes, we do ask if there are criminal charges. And if there are, that's when we talk to the individual about, we like to do background checks just so that we can kind of be aware of what's going to come up when an employer does a background check, so that we can anticipate what's going on and different things like that, and have that conversation with the client that we're not just pulling that information to have it, like it's to help prepare for vocational things down the road. But then we have them sign a release and do either an in-state background check is generally what we do, but depending on where that person has lived and if they report that they've had charges out of state, we'll do a national background check if that's necessary for the person as well.
And then I'm just curious, and then so the third or the last bullet there, so disclosure is interesting to me, I think, and I'm not making judgments about anything, but what percentage of businesses do you think are doing background checks right now?
In Sioux Falls, I know that fast food is about the only place that doesn't do background checks.
Does not. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I think that it's an interesting topic to me, I think, and I think it mirrors like disability disclosure, other disclosure, in that like if somebody has a possession charge and it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I'm just curious what you guys think. I'm not telling you what to think or anything, but, like how relevant, I think that's different than if somebody has a sex offender charge, and they don't, like if McDonald's doesn't ask about the sex offender charge, it's kind of like, well, what's your responsibility, right? Did you have, and is there anybody, I'm sorry, Kendra, I don't want to pick on you the whole time, but you're a huge resource, I think, for all of us, as we figure this stuff out. But I'd like to ask you that question, like of your role, like if somebody has possession charge, right? Versus if like what in terms of what advice you're giving people about disclosure and that kind of stuff. Does anybody else have, before I ask you, Kendra,
okay.
Does anybody else have any thoughts about that they'd like to share? Is medical marijuana legal in South Dakota?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Almost.
Okay,
Almost, but not yet.
Almost, but not yet. But recreational is definitely not, right? Obviously,
it's supposed to be, but it's not yet.
Okay. So obviously, I mean, I don't know, but if you're a human being, I just think that causes me problems. I struggle with that, with like somebody has a possession charge when we're about to head towards, I think eventually we're going to get to national legalization. So it's just like, how do you deal with that? That's just me personally. I don't know how to, but can somebody else add? I think somebody was going to speak and I cut you off.
I think with the lack of employees for jobs, that it has lessened the amount of background checks and drug checks that are being done because they need the bodies.
Yeah.
I really think that, I really think that has. And on the last topic, my very first client was someone that had everything possible wrong, I think, but in his past. And I think the most important part that was missing for him is that he didn't follow through on his therapy that he needed for gambling, for alcohol, for various things. And had he done that, he would have been successful. He was in his job for 6 months and then boom, right back at it. Yeah. He was doing so good, but had he followed through on that therapy, I think it would have been better.
Yeah.
Russell, I'm going to jump into, we're kind of in the same area as Brenda. We're not huge like Sioux Falls, but we are a bigger area. And we kind of know the employers that are going to do the background checks and the ones that don't do the background checks. But we've taken it, to where, yes, it says that they're going to do a background check, but maybe this person, like you said, had a possession charge 10 years ago. So then it's an, easy as, I'm going to throw this out there, Cubby's here in town does background checks. But if those types of things do come up on your background, that does not eliminate you from having a job, so just making that phone call when you have that relationship with an employer and saying, you know, yeah, hey, I see that you guys do background checks. Can you tell me what red flags are going to throw somebody out of an opportunity to get that employment? Because we all just assume, oh, if you have a background and they do a background checks, you're not going to get a job there, which is not true in a lot of places.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
obviously any type of theft charge in a Cubby's, which is a gas station, that's going to throw you out. But like you said, a possession charge, and sometimes even with them, even the drug charges could be more of a recent one, but depending on what type of drug charge it is and the class that it is, that could also just be disregarded and you would have an opportunity for employment there.
Right. It's all context, right? Depending on the individual and obviously all the particulars of the business and what their concerns are. So a couple really, really great points. I think, Kayla, you just said about, so you're doing that when you talk to a business, because the trick would be if you're, and this is kind of, you know, if you're talking to a business about one person and you ask that question, it's like you're kind of tipping your hat, you know what I mean? Because I think it is somewhat of a judgment call about, you know, do you tell them or do you don't? With certain things, depending on the context. But if you're saying you're approaching businesses and having general conversations just about their policies or their approaches towards hiring people with criminal background checks and what they deem important or what they wouldn't, that's a different conversation, right? Than disclosing for somebody and maybe mistakenly doing some harm.
Yeah, and you know, you could make it a stretch a little bit and say, you know, call up so and so, hey, you know, we've talked before about openings. I see you now have another opening. I have several people who are qualified for this position, but I see that you do a background check. Could you tell me what types of things are going to be red flags for that background check?
Right.
You know, maybe you do only have one person that's a good fit for that, but stretching that out, saying, you know, hey, I have several people who would be a good fit.
That's
and then
smart.
you're not singling out that person.
There's nothing wrong with that at all. I think to tell. I mean, I mean, you're
it a little bit.
That's wonderful. No, I mean, I think it's a lie for a good reason. You know what I mean, but it doesn't hurt anybody. You know, I mean, I think that's great. That's wonderful. Yeah, and then you know, I think you know, I think, and what you're saying too. The other thing you're saying is you've spoken about qualifications. You know, people are you know, they have the skills, you know, you spoke about competencies. And I think you're also, you know, I mean, we've talked a lot about us, you know, one of the values of our services is that for free to the business, like we act as somebody who does a bit of that, you know, I don't know if I like the word screening or, you know, all that, but we'll help them meet qualified people, right? Or people who we think fits what they're looking for, right? And they don't have to do that work, you know, so we're greasing those wheels. So I think that it makes a lot of sense as part of that. That's a service we offer to business, is connection to we think good employees. So that could be part of that conversation. Very not weird, right? I mean, again, a third of the population, a third of the working age population. Yeah, sorry, Brenda.
That's okay. I think employers are more willing to be compromising or work with somebody now. I think it's a very good time for VR clients to get a job. And I think the employers know that maybe we know more about the participant we're trying to place with them. We know about their background, and maybe the client has said, hey, share it, or the client has shared it. Whereas somebody off the street just walking in could lie fully on their application and they wouldn't even know. So I think they might be a little safer hiring from somebody who has some inside information, and we know who's willing to help or work with people. Mm-hmm. Like Kayla said, you know who might be more accepting and more willing to work with somebody.
Yeah, and that speaks to another, I think, wonderful point, is that your efforts of maybe building a relationship with a business or an employer, you know, so that they can trust you, you know, so and understand that you're also you know, I think one of the things with businesses that sometimes we struggle with is like, it doesn't help us to help them make a bad hire, you know, like, I mean, in the short term, we get maybe a placement, but in the medium to long term, it hurts everybody, you know, and our credibility, our relationships. So I think that you don't want to help them hire somebody that's not going to work out, or you don't think is going to work out. So you've done your due diligence, you know, again, to to help them to come together. The other thing you said, Brenda, which I think is brilliant, is, and I think this is relevant for, again, I think more traditional disability work, is just the connection with and the continued, I think the continued coordination of kind of wraparound services, or whatever you'd call those, like that it's, when people have a job, it's awesome, but just like in maybe Medicaid, if people don't have, if transportation falls apart, then they can't get to the job, or follow along doesn't, or like you said, if like the therapy or they're following through with the other supports, we have to, the ongoing support, our role is to, we can't make people do stuff, obviously, but our role is to make that a part of the plan and make sure, I think it's interesting, right? Because I think when, sometimes folks who we may be working with criminal background checks, like you said, have some, or I think Kendra said that their relationships aren't maybe the most healthy. And so we have less ability to influence them, like if somebody's in Medicaid group home, like, they're controlled. And so like, for better or worse, often for worse, but we know who to talk to make sure things happen. Brenda, if they're, if the people are on their own and they have a lot of control over their life, then maybe sometimes people make tough, bad decisions. And so I think that our job is, but also they have other people like a parole officer or maybe a therapist involved. And, and how can we then coordinate that and check in? I did see like, we saw during the last training that like one of the biggest reasons that people don't follow, or that people are closed unsuccessfully, is we just lose touch with them, like we can't find them anymore. And so I think that, maybe when people do have these other services, we can make sure that we're, like you said, I think that's just brilliant that they follow through with the other supports. And again, we can't make people do stuff, make sure there's a plan. Because I mean, work changes people's schedules. I mean, there's a kind of, I think, a period of getting used to it. The data shows, like, for people with mental health supports, that, I mean, it's like the healthiest thing you could do. That it's like housing first, employment first. That it leads to good outcomes. But I think you also have to understand that some of the stuff needs to be work. We have to make it work, kind of. So cool. Anybody else want to add anything about Kendra? In terms of Kayla and Brenda, do you work also at the what do you all call it again, Kendra? I'm sorry. It's the
I work at Southeastern Behavioral Health Care in Sioux Falls.
Okay.
And so I'm the only one here.
Okay. So everybody else would work in a more traditional CRP where the referral would come from VR probably.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I work at Cornerstones along with Carla that I see that's on.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. And so in that case, how does, can you describe the process of learning about, so like, and what percentage do you think of people you're working with have criminal, how frequently have criminal records?
I think all of the people that I'm working with have had some sort of mental condition.
Mm-hmm.
Only one has had a criminal background.
A criminal, okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
People are staying away from that's good. And then, so with that person, how were you made aware of that?
I got a report that
From the-
had everything in it, and I thought, wow, if I can find a job for this guy and it works out, this is going to be a piece of cake. And I just talked with him honestly, talked with the employer honestly, and they were willing to give him a shot.
Nice. Cool. And then, would you, so you saw the report and then you had a conversation with him about,
Mhm.
about your, just about it. And then
He was
gave
very
you-
open. Yeah,
Okay.
he was very open.
Cool. And so he gave you permission, told you like kind of
Yep.
what to share, and okay.
Oh,
So then
he
you-
shared.
He did.
He
So you and he, he shared with
Yeah,
you.
He shared it every day with the employer, I think.
Okay.
I mean, he just like, it was unusual.
Yeah, that's interesting. Some of the stuff I've read is about, I don't know if it with him was just how, like there's a stigma that maybe the people have, but then there's also like once you're through, there's a worry like the people say they're good with it, but then they're really not, you know, like for people of,
Mhm.
you know, so there's almost like as an employee with a criminal record that the other shoe's going to drop eventually, you know, that I think maybe irrational, but, or I don't know, there's a lot of evidence, but just the worry of that, you know, that hangs over to maybe, I don't know, was that a part of that, you think, where he's,
Mm-mm.
no, okay.
I think the employer they were awesome
Super cool.
about it.
Uh-huh.
And the employee was ambiguous. He didn't think it should matter.
The employee?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Okay. Would anybody else like to add anything around these topics? So you've had 100% success rate, Brenda, with, we just lost you
Yes.
there. So, okay.
Well, yes, but until his relapse 6
Oh, and
months.
then, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he went, yeah.
And so without sharing details, but it's, he just, maybe there were some supports that he didn't follow through with.
He didn't follow through on
Yeah.
his counseling.
And counseling. Who else besides you would have been kind of in the mix for trying to set that up and verifying that would have happened? Does that make sense? Because 6 months, you're probably,
well-
were you guys, I'm sorry.
We tell him he should go, but there's nothing that makes them have to go to continue to get supports. And you know, you see them, what seems like they're getting better, and you know, they're melding with working, and it's all working out. And then you walk into the HR office of the business and they say, well, did you hear?
Yeah.
Because I'm no longer supporting him because he's successful. And I said, no, what happened? And they told me, and I said, wow.
Yeah. Well, and right, I mean, I don't think we have a specific topic about working with people in recovery, but you know, I mean, my awareness of it, it's a day-to-day thing, right? Like,
yeah. And he actually did not think he had a problem. So that was, you know, we deal with the same thing. The courts order people to come to GED classes. If they don't want to be there, they're not going to be there.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
I was happy it lasted 6 months. I mean, I thought that was a good thing.
Yeah.
But I would have liked to have seen it last a lot longer.
Who was he was living on his own? And no like group set, nobody.
Yeah, there were some, as referred, bad influencers there.
Yeah. And then you had the therapist, had you, and then you guys, so after 6 months.
But he didn't go to the therapist.
Right. A therapist who they're not gonna, you know, they're also not gonna be hounding people probably.
Right. Well, and they have so many clients.
Yeah. And then so if it was 6 months, the case was closed successfully?
Yeah.
Okay. And then did anybody provide follow-along supports after that? Or like after the closure?
Right, Jordan, you don't. After it's successfully closed, their case
VR
is closed, they would have to reapply.
Well, VR would typically not, yeah, but there may be other ways to find, that's the other thing I think to think about, Jordan, as do you remember if he had any Social Security benefits or anything?
Yes.
Okay. So
off and on.
Okay. So I just think I think that's something that, just like with anybody who's in supported employment, you know, I mean, I just think sometimes people, I think, you know, whether it's informally or maybe more formal, there's a whole kind of array of problems, but we could think of like, how do we use alternative funding sources? Like there are Social Security work incentives where we could find ways to help him pay for that for some ongoing supports. Because if you're really involved, you know, until closure, and then, you know, you're not so much involved because you move on to the, you know, you have other, I mean, I just think that's, it may be a support that could be very valuable if we can find a way to continue. And then also wondering like if he's receiving Medicaid, if there's any way to, and then there's something called Ticket to Work. which is tied to Social Security that can also be used to get some more funding, depending on how much he's working. Is anybody on, I think you may have asked this during an earlier one, is anybody a ticket to work besides VR? Y'all are, Kendra?
I get a lot of ticket to work payments. It actually is very nice. I pretty much tell the clients once they're open with VR, I never go away. VR might go away, but
Yeah.
I check in with their case managers even like 3 years after the fact.
Yeah.
Whether it's I actually call the person or I just check their notes on our system. Because I have clients that I helped find employment like 6 years ago, and I'll get the ticket to work thing from Bernie and just check in and see if they're still working and still following along with services and stuff, because we have the whole wraparound
Yeah.
with Southeastern.
That may be something to figure out. I mean, it can be substantial money if it works for people. And the cool thing about Ticket to Work is it's not tethered to anything. You can do whatever you want with it. So it's just, and it doesn't, awesome. Yeah, cool. So you share, Jill. So that's the Partnership Plus, or I think it's what it used to be called, where once the case is closed successfully, then you pass it on. Yeah.
We have an agreement with our providers, and we do what's called Plan for Sustaining Employment is the form that we fill out before the case is closed. And then we get the Ticket to Work money as VR, and then we do payments out to providers. I don't know how frequently that happens, but
Okay.
It's usually,
We get it quarterly here.
yeah, it's usually done quarterly when when they hit the milestones.
sure.
Okay.
The
So the
first-
money.
First milestone goes directly to VR. And then each milestone after that is split between VR and the community support provider.
Okay. And that comes through VR, and then you guys are paying? That's how that works? Okay.
Yes, yep. Yeah, Bernie sends out a report every quarter.
Okay. I'd love to see that. Because I think that's not very typical. I mean, I've not heard a state that does it like that, because a state, I'd like to learn more about that. I don't want to speak out of turn. So Jill, are you all actually a employment network through Ticket? You're not, probably.
No,
Okay.
and I think there might be, and Jordan, maybe there might only be like 1 or 2 community support providers in the state that are. And
Yes.
that's why we have the system that we have through where we split it with VR.
Yeah, that's brilliant. One of the
As
problems
of
is
now, VR is the only employment network in South Dakota.
in the whole
Okay.
state.
I think at one time there was like maybe one,
Yeah.
like maybe Lifescape or something, but maybe they're not anymore.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
I don't remember when that changed, but it's been in the last several years, I think that,
So, yeah,
We
the
have-
problem with
VR and that's it.
Well, the problem with the Ticket to Work is a big administrative nightmare to get your, and so you guys are acting like essentially like a administrative entity, to then passing through the money. I'd love to figure out how. I've not heard any other states to do that, but there's a NDI, National Disemployment or Institute, NDI, I forget, but they do that too, where they'll deal with all the crap, with the feds, and you subcontract with them, and they take a percentage, and pass through the rest for that. So cool. That may be and for Brenda and Kayla something to think about for ongoing supports. And I wonder how people are informed about. Jordan, do you know about sharing that, or if other people can jump in, or?
Like how, can you
Like,
clarify your question? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So the person Brenda was working with, case was closed, and if they did not, it sounded like they did not like that. And he may not have been working enough, but how would that be shared? That
If the person is on Social Security, that's something that the counselor usually talks to the client about before their case is closed.
okay.
Now, it does happen once in a while that the person is still working and we lose track of them and can't get them to sign the plan for sustaining employment. And without that plan for sustaining employment in place, we can't establish those Ticket to Work payments. But the initial communication usually occurs through the counselor. and
Yeah.
then we set it up that way.
And we do the same thing that Jill does at
Okay.
Career Connections. We usually get the information from the counselor. We'll take the plan for sustaining employment out to the client. We'll go over that with them, have them sign it, and then return it back to the counselor.
Does that specifically have to do with ticket? Just the
Yeah.
plan for, okay, sustainment. Okay, cool. Yeah, the tricky
But
thing
we
with that, of
just-
course.
Oops, sorry.
Oh, go
We
ahead.
just we do that stuff right in the initial meeting when I meet with David and the client to get their case open. We just do the plan for sustaining right away, explain what it is if we know they have benefits. Although if we forget to do it, if they're a client here, I usually just send it to the case manager. Then I'm like, hey, when you meet with this person next, can you just get a signature and get it back to me? And then I get it back to the VR counselor. So I guess that is one of the biggest benefits about how we kind of operate here is that they have to see their case manager and they have to follow through to be able to receive services. So
Yeah,
we always have track of where they are unless they just kind of stop with Southeastern Services altogether.
okay, cool. And that would be, I mean, it's definitely as people are getting closer to like, well, here's the job and stability in 90 days, it would hopefully prompt, if that somehow that paperwork didn't get signed or got missed, which it sounds like it's not because it's part of intake for y'all.
We tried to do it right up front because we
Yeah.
hadn't been missing a lot of them.
Yeah,
And so when we realized that there were some tickets that never got signed, that's when we just kind of decided we need to do this right
Yeah.
away.
yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, it's a real bummer to be like, oh, there's $10,000 we didn't get.
Yeah.
You know, and then it's your finance person won't be happy about that, but cool. Okay, now can I just, I'm just curious about, so those of you that work with both, and I appreciate Kayla and Brenda and Kendra talking, if anybody else would want to share maybe how their services may look different when somebody has, I mean, obviously there's the, well, the stuff we've talked about, but could somebody else share, I guess, how their processes change or how they adapt if you're working with somebody who has a criminal background?
This is Laura in Rapid City.
Hey, Laura.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great.
Good program. You know, I work with felons out here, and generally, you know, I'm finding they're so angry. And unfortunately, what happens as the process rolls out, you know, as they are released, some of that anger at different times has been directed at me.
Oh,
Because for whatever reason, because I'm not in their transition environment or whatever. For example, I'm working with a younger man that is a sex offender.
mhm.
And I have found him employment, but he's just really angry about the employment. Like he feels like, he doesn't have to accept the job, but I feel like I'm, picking up that feeling that she found me a job. I didn't really want a job, that kind of idea.
Oh,
And
So,
I've actually been threatened by ex-felons before.
mhm.
It can get a little hairy and
Sure.
scary at times. And, and I feel torn because I feel like there's a demand to provide services. One of those services being taking them to interviews and this and that. But then there's also that fear factor
Mhm.
that you have being around them.
Mhm.
I mean, to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Like you don't know how reactive they're going to be from day to day,
Mhm.
depending on the circumstance.
And so has anybody had any personal, I mean, you don't have to, personal familial experience with the criminal justice system? I mean, you don't have to share the details. But
Just
I
hold on
have.
for a second here. I
I'm
want to
sorry?
announce the code word. Sorry. It's flower, but the attendance form, somebody just mentioned it to me and I was going to mention this earlier. The date is wrong on there. You need to select the one that's 5/24 and it says working with criminal offenders, but that will still get you the attendance completed correctly.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, sorry. I don't want to make any broad sweeping generalizations about about people coming out of the system, but in my experience, the system is not built for rehabilitation. It's built for punishment. And people are not treated very well, when they're there. So yeah, so I mean, when people are, I mean, and I just read something yesterday. There's this big thing that blew up about a person who was helped. Like they made a big contact, they made a big relationship, and the guy was helped getting out of parole. And then just the transition back was just overwhelming to him. And so it was the person who on the outside that was helping him lessen his parole was telling the story about how she felt like, basically like she felt like she couldn't understand how that relationship dissolved. But from his perspective, what he was telling her was, it's just a lot to deal with, and so the relationship that they had prior, under these new conditions, there were a lot of stressors. So yeah, I mean, I think that people are angry probably about, I don't want to generalize, but as they're coming out, I mean, just kind of trying to figure out what's next is probably really stressful, I would think. And if you're the primary staff, the primary interactor to help people move on to the next life or next part of their life, I could guess that you're probably, like you said, are going to feel some of that, sometimes implicit or sometimes more explicitly. One thing I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, well, I wonder if I should, just make a policy that, when they're ex-felons, not to, take them places and do, to job interviews and that kind of thing. I mean, I'm kind of on the fence. I tend to like to, give people the, I don't know.
Yeah, the
Be
benefit
fair
of the
with
doubt.
people. But I wonder sometimes about safety.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
and the way the system is set, it's concerning sometimes to me, although I've been backed up 100%. I mean, Voc Rehab has always told me, if you feel unsafe with a client, you just get away,
Yeah. Do you feel like you're getting the information you need ahead of time? Like some of the, and again, this is just in general with my work, some of the worst experiences are when I feel like I didn't see something coming or I was unaware, and that's not fun, And I don't think that's, many times it's nobody's fault. It's just, I just missed something. And I feel like I'm not prepared, that's not a good feeling.
Is there well, that's a really good point, because is there like a checklist of questions we should be asking?
Well, I think that's something that sorry.
People with some of these, some backgrounds, like this of aggression, because it can rear its head up, just bam like that. I had one guy that I literally, he got really, really angry and started pounding the table because I wouldn't lie for him to an employer.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't do it. And he was pounding the table. I had to hide basically, I waited till my husband came to get me. I didn't leave the place where I was meeting him. I mean, that's how extreme it can get. They can get that, it can get that reactive.
And then what about, do you feel like in the information you were given about him that there was anything there or in previous meetings that?
I would, and, it was pretty good, but I wasn't told about, and maybe, I mean, the counselor maybe didn't know, but this man evidently was beating up his girlfriend, his significant other, quite a lot.
Oh.
All of this came out, but he'd been in prison 20 some years for, a crime that had to do, which what I was told he kind of minimized. Well, he wasn't guilty. He was just something like that.
Wrong place at the wrong time kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. However, he came out and just started basically spewing anger everywhere, on around him.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed, and I don't know if it's, but looking at everybody, am I the only male on right now? Like just, I think, and not to be sexist or anything, but I think that that it's nice probably to have a guy. I mean, not that I'm sure most of you, okay, thank you. Most of you could probably handle yourself better than me anyway, but I just think that in my experience, 85% of our work is female. And I just think that if the population of in general is 50-50, maybe, I don't know. I mean, I hope that doesn't sound awful, but it'd probably be, if you're not comfortable, I mean, my advice would be like, never, I would hate to have you have any kind of blanket policy, because you'd miss out on meeting somebody great and working with them. But I also think that, like, I just type down, like, and I think, how do you get to know people in a way where you're safe and comfortable? And it may not, there may be people that you just aren't comfortable with. And if there were like a male or somebody or a female that felt comfortable, I just think having other people, so you're not just, I'm not sure in your organization if you're the only person, but having somebody who to say, I don't feel comfortable, but it's not that you don't serve them, make sure they get services from somebody else. And that can happen from, I hope that didn't sound bad about.
Oh, right. No, I'm a private provider here.
Okay, so just you. Okay, yes,
yeah, it was just me. So, and I take that into consideration as well.
Yeah.
And I hope I don't sound like I'm conflating,
No.
the situation at all. But I'm just wondering about things like, safety and what are best policies and policies. And is there some type of, checklist to basically determine how many services you're going to provide and that kind of idea.
So some kind of process for
for assisting with decision making when it comes to working with individuals that have the potential for that behavior.
Yeah.
Because that's not always easy to assess. Mm-hmm. Because one thing about the criminal mindset, I will tell you, is, inside, there is a criminal mindset and it's a real thing. And, they kind of tend to con you, to a certain degree.
Yeah. I was going to share my familial experience wasn't that. My experience was like people were just real frustrated and angry about how they were treated, when they were in the system. So, not that, people may have that kind of ongoing looking to take advantage, but my experience has been that people haven't been treated very well. And they're responsible, obviously, for whatever led to that. But it's a pretty brutal, the criminal justice system in general is it's obviously not person-centered, it's the opposite of that. And
yes,
so
exactly.
it's pretty rough, and then transitioning can be real tough. So yeah, I think it'd be, and I mean, a lot of that again is like, but that's your judgment call about how do you, I think, again, how do you be trusted? I mean, anybody who's a professional who's paid to help them, again, from my family, there weren't a lot of professionals that were looking out for their best interest, there was a lot of systems crap, and so I think a lot of that is, how do you get information so you can make a informed decision? How do you build trust so the person, obviously you're not going to do anything unethical or anything like that, but so that people feel like you are looking out for their best interest. You're not another person kind of shuffling along. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, that's a good point. So how do you feel comfortable? People, need, it's good for all of us if these individuals find a way to reintegrate. But we have to find a way to do it well. And obviously the Kendra note that I'm sure you saw it, Jordan, I'm sure you would not agree with that, or, so I think there probably are systems things, that we can talk about, or maybe best practices. I think that's awesome. That's what this is about. Do you have anything to say about that, Jordan?
No, just that I would, I'm glad that you shared that, Kendra, but it's not practice for counselors to withhold information like that from our providers. Because it's something that, I mean, we know that, I mean, I think for the most part, we know that you guys need to know information to do your job. And especially in a situation like that, where that could have been a safety issue, that's definitely something that we would as a rule. Make sure that you guys are aware of. So I can't speak to that situation. I don't know who it was. I don't know the situation, obviously, but that's something that, in addition to many other things, you know, when we kind of ran the data and determined that we have the number of previous criminal offenders on our caseloads, that we're talking about internally ways that we need to deal with that information and things that we need to do as counselors, which will include communicating things to our providers to make sure that not only the clients are being served, but that everybody is being made safe in those situations. So I apologize that was the case.
Did you, Kendra, I don't know, did you follow up on that, Kendra? I don't know if you're available, but. And that was not somebody that you sent them, that was somebody that it was the other way, or, because usually you would get to know people, right?
Yeah, so I mean, usually we know the person and then
Yeah.
I send them to Voc Rehab, and this was an incident where the Voc Rehab counselor got a hold of us and told us she had somebody, and I just happened to one day be like looking people up and put his name in, and there he was on the registry, like, oh, hey, look at that. And so
And
unfortunately,
when you followed up with the counselor, they said that they didn't think it was relevant, or?
she's like, oh, I guess I must have just had forgotten. And you don't just forget something like that. It was a pretty violent.
Yeah, okay.
And we're all, and like back when this happened, there were 3 of us working here, and we're all females, and we all have our own little individual office where we were working alone with this person at times. So there was just, I mean, we have our panic buttons and stuff, and the police station is just across the street, but still, like,
Yeah.
enough time for something bad to happen.
Yeah. So maybe would a redundancy be like if you guys would run your own, like, or that's a cost, there's a cost associated with that. And
I'm sorry, what was that?
like, could there be a way, like, I mean, a policy change for that? So what I'm saying, like, I really worry about, and I know you're not doing it, but you know, if you have a bad experience, the worry would be that it somehow becomes the norm. You think it'll be the norm. And I know you're not saying that. So like, with anybody with any label. So I just wonder, like, to make sure, let's say you cannot trust anybody 100%. Like, I mean, that's, you know, people make, would a fail proof be like, well, we could run our own background check for people. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, no, I don't think we would ever be able to run our own background check. I don't know how.
Okay.
And I mean, even when they do, I mean, I've been pushed into corners and had doors slammed in my face and been called like every name. Like, I get it. It comes with the job. I work with people who have severe mental health illnesses, and so it happens. It's just when you're completely blindsided by some of that stuff that it's just.
That's not yeah, I was saying earlier, that's when you feel the worst, I think.
And you know, my experience, I think I've only worked with a handful of people, VR referrals, that had criminal records. And, you know, I think one of the things is that if a referral doesn't tell the counselor everything that they should know, they don't always know. I know in one particular instance, you know, I requested the VR counselor to run a background check on the person, because, correct me if I'm wrong, Jordan, but you don't typically do background checks on your clients unless there's, you know, a reason to run a background check on them, correct?
It's not a standard procedure that we just run a background check on everybody.
Yeah,
No.
so I think, you know, sometimes if a client comes into VR and they don't give them their history or their true story, you know, they just don't have enough information to pass on.
It could get missed if they didn't offer it. Yeah. Okay. So that's how I just wrote, how to make sure we have all the information. You know, I just think like building in redundancies, like just, you know, again, I don't know how much that would cost, but to make sure you get information. But okay. And then the only other, we're past our time, but the only other thing I was wondering was just about self-employment as an option. I know that that's, you know, starting your own, again, not for everybody, obviously, but starting your own business is a way that people can circumvent some of those barriers. And I know that some, not a lot, but some places are doing things where they'll like one of my favorite quotes was, there was a guy, this prison was helping people as they were transitioning or getting ready to transition back in. They bring in entrepreneurs, business owners to talk to people. And the guy, the quote that just hit me hard, was that the guy got out and started his own landscaping business. And he said the reason that he did that was because when the business owner came in, he talked to me like a man, like he spoke to me like I'm a human being, basically, And then the same thing happens when he gets out. Like he'll talk to other people who do that similar work, and people talk to him like a man, not like a convict, is what he said. So I was just like, oh wow, it's pretty, that hits you hard. That's clear what he means there. So, and I know self-employment's not a huge option in the VR system in general anyway, but I don't know, I think sometimes, that could be a nice way, something to help people explore, again, a lot of, how people's lives are going, supports, that kind of stuff's gonna, I think, determine some of that. So, okay. Well, we're over time. Any other, I don't have anything else to do until I think 2 o'clock. So I'm free for the next bit if anybody wants to talk or anything.
I think the only thing just before we finish up for today is, like I said, we've discovered that this is something that we need to kind of clarify on our end too. So if you guys run into situations or have questions about things, please let me know, because it's maybe stuff that isn't on our radar yet on this topic. And we're wanting to clarify that. We're wanting to standardize it a little bit, just to, I don't know, just with everything. We want to be able to give everybody the same information so that we can all meet that common goal of serving our clients. So if you guys run into situations or questions, please feel free, even after the fact, after today, it could be 6 months from now. Please feel free to send those to me, and we'll make sure that they get on our radar in some way, shape, or form. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, and that's what this is for, is to work through that stuff and find out those details. Cool.
Well, you don't think that it has anything to do with preconceived notions with working with clients, do you? For example, sometimes you wonder if counselors maybe are not telling you everything because they don't want to instill a preconceived notion in your relationship with that client. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that could be, that's a good insight. That's possible.
I wonder, you kind of wonder if that's going on a little bit. I mean, because I don't think a counselor or whatever would ever want you to be unsafe in any way.
No.
However, there is that idea that once someone gives you an idea about a person,
that it changes. Yeah. No, I understand. Like the observer alters what's observed.
Concept.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think. I think that you can ask for all the information that's available, and then I think you should expect that you get all that. It's definitely possible that counselors miss things. I mean, because they're, or again, it's context or other things that they don't have access to that information either. So I think that's something. I think that they should. I'd be surprised. I mean, again, like what happened with she left, but I'd say that, and Jordan would agree that that's not what's expected. That people should share with you any information that's relevant. For the employment search, but also for your safety and just professional expectations. Don't
take this. I'm not accusing anything.
No.
Just an abstract concept I'm thinking of, because
I think that's a very good point that should be considered. But
is that viable or not? And it's almost like I had a client, introduced to me that had a pattern of being argumentative and angry.
Yeah.
No one apprised me of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the things is
I encountered it myself, and I'm like, why? To me, to a certain degree, forewarned is forearmed. And like I said, I don't think the intention was bad at all. But I think, that, as you say, information, can be really important.
Yeah. I think what's possible that, I mean, it's often happened just with the general referral that the counselor doesn't have the full picture, because they can't really, because they're working with a lot of people. They typically aren't spending a lot of in-person time with with that individual. Sometimes they may, but so I think those kind of interactions may not have been witnessed, or if it's like, hey, you felt this paperwork, it's a very clear directive. There's not a lot of kind of negotiation happening.
Mhm.
So I think it's definitely possible that the counselor just didn't know it.
Mhm.
But I also think that you could share with the counselor, like, I mean, in a way that's supportive, just to say, I work with all types of people, and people who are going to be harder to get to know, and so any information you give me is going to be, I can handle. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So they understand. But I that's a good point, that people are worried maybe that you want to work with a person.
Well, I think the case maybe is that they're afraid that you won't accept them or something. And as a
Yeah.
client, they don't have any recourse. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because, there have been cases where you'll have a client that's gone through every provider on the roster
Yeah.
and, because of their behaviors.
So if
But-
you, yeah. And you would know about that when you start working with them, if they had worked with 5 others and
Well, not necessarily.
necessarily.
You aren't really told that.
Yeah.
I mean, so
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I mean, the problem is that you're not gonna, even if everything goes peachy with you and the person, it's a nuance, it's a support need, that maybe you aren't able to tell the business, I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, I definitely think you don't want to screen people out because of something that happened, 20 years ago. It may be that you're not the right person to work with them. I don't know, but
well,
at
yeah,
least-
because it's funny, you'll have clients like that, and then suddenly you'll hit the right person that I've done that repeatedly, worked with difficult clients that I've had no problem with.
yeah. So sometimes it's just maybe just
So-
not a right match.
So, it just, I don't know. Anyway, I'll
Yeah.
let you go. You're
No,
busy.
it's a good topic. I think I think professional expectations, you get all the information that's relevant. So I always, I think I think my point is just always give people the benefit of the doubt. Like, I don't think anybody would intentionally put you in a tough situation.
Oh, no,
But
I totally agree.
that said, though, I think that if you're noticing something happens, it's missed. I think it's important to follow up on that and try to brainstorm with a counselor and maybe just find a way to make sure that
Mhm.
doesn't happen again.
Mhm.
I do think if you're the only person, that's tough, because you can't, if you meet the person and it's like, well, I'm not, sometimes it's like, we don't get along, just not my cup of tea. If you don't have somebody then to kind of have step in, that can be tough. So I don't know if there's other providers that you network with or anything.
The thing is the providers, we don't, out here, we don't discuss our clients with one another at all.
No.
And, we used, well,
Maybe
we're not
something to look
talking like
into.
we were pre-COVID,
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
put it
Yeah.
that way. So
Yeah. That may be something, because again, it's like, hey, sometimes it just doesn't work for me, but if somebody else, just like, yeah. Okay.
very good. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. Bye. Cool. All right. Jordan. It's interesting that, again, just as an observation, Jordan, that most people are female. Again, not to, just as an observation. I think I've seen that. And they're just thinking, as a male, I have certain biases that I don't think about, sometimes. And again, not to be sexist, but because again, I'm sure half the people on here could kick my ass really easy if they wanted to. But I think that's a complication, right? Something, a consideration, I think.
Definitely a different perspective on the situation.
Just be aware of, yeah. So I have found that's in my whole, one of the places I worked with, we did the demographics because our goal was we wanted to make our business, and we did like supported living and like reflect the community, like in all demographics. And we worked with like half males and we were like 85% female. And it was just an interesting thing, to kind of look at, like, why is that? Why is that like that? And it's hard sometimes to find a good, I think a lot of it's because men are idiots. Men aren't they're not, so it's like, it's hard to find a good guy, good man's hard to find, but I do think it's maybe a loss. There's something missing, if you don't have, but I don't know, just a observation. Who knows what it means.
Before I jump off, I just want to say our counselors in our area are great. Jordan, every time you're on, I always have to brag about our counselors here. They are fantastic, especially when it comes to anything like this. They will tell us, they divulge everything. And if we meet with the consumer and feel that maybe the consumer did not give the counselor everything that they should have, they will take our word for it, and if we ask for them to do a background check because we just don't feel that maybe they were honest, they don't question us. We have great counselors in the area that I'm working.
Sure. And thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's the ideal situation, is that, hey, here's everything that I've got. Or, hey, you didn't tell me this, and this might be something that I got that you didn't get. Like that is an ideal kind of format for communication, is just that collaboration and that back and forth, so that everybody is, one way or another getting that full picture of what's going on for that person, because ultimately we all need to know to be able to support them.
Yep. Yeah, and they're great. Our counselors are great here.
Yes.
I agree with Kayla. I'm in the same area, and
Yes,
I'm
Brenda
new.
works with the same counselors as my employment.
I am new to this, so they're very helpful, and it's been great. Jessica always tells me I don't just stop brown nosing. I don't need to brown nose. I said, no, I'm being honest. You shouldn't. I'm just honest. If I don't like something, I'll tell you. If I like it, I'll tell you. So that's it.
And they're very good too about throwing out suggestions, when earlier we were talking about, where do you find that good placement for them? I mean, our counselors are out there kicking pavement just like we are, letting people know who they are, what our program is. They're out there giving talks to the schools, to, anything really. So they're out there just as much as we are, and they'll give us suggestions. I think he'd be a really good fit here, or I think with this employer, we probably should be careful. I know he says he wants to work there, but we need to watch for this. Maybe he has some anger issues, or she has some anger issues. And the supervisor, we all know, is short-tempered, so it's like they will throw that out there too for us. So yeah, I just didn't wanted everyone to know that we do have really great counselors.
Cool.
And if you want to move to Mitchell, we're looking for another counselor, I think.
Yes, I stole one of your really great counselors. I
Aw.
apologize.
Yes, you did. But it's a good role for her. It's a very good role.
For sure.
Have a good
Awesome.
week.
All right. See
Thank
y'all.
you, everyone.
The weekend's coming,
Bye.
so have a good weekend.